Who here has been disappointed by a svíčková? I know I have. That is the reason I created this side project. A website to review svíčková. I'm Aaron, and when I'm not eating svíčková, I'm a front-end developer at Mews. And I'm always looking at someone to recruit to share svíčková with me. A bit about me, I'm from New Zealand. I lived in Prague for 6 years. And my favorite food is svíčková. Tough crowd. I was expecting somebody to react or something. For those of you who don't know, svíčková is a traditional Czech meal made up of 5 key components. You have the meat, the sauce, the dumplings, the cranberry, and the... Nailed it. This picture here was taken on top of a mountain, Liberec. Yes, Jed. Is anyone here from Liberec? Nice. Beautiful place. Average svíčková. A bit of backstory. Everywhere I travel to in the Czech Republic, every hospital, Czech pub, every restaurant, or every wedding, I end up having the svíčková. And during this time, it surprised me how much it differed in quality and in taste. In 2019, I was invited to the Battle of Svíčková. This was hosted in Pilsen. COVID was a difficult time. Most places were closed, and I only got my hands on a few takeaway svíčková. Lucky for me, some friends were bringing me svíčková, sometimes cooked by the babička, the grandmother, which was super nice. I've always been a big fan of doing side projects, working on a hobby project, and I decided to make a diary to record every place I eat svíčková. It would be a website to review svíčková. I wanted to share part of the journey, part of the process, and some of the challenges I faced along the way. So some of the challenges. 1, I needed to design a widget to review the svíčková. I needed to keep track of the widget's state, and I needed to allow multiple users to review the same restaurant entity. I also needed to decide how to save the data. To give you an idea, here's a functioning review widget. Pretty neat, right? A svíčková is made up of 5 different parts. I would like to rate each part differently, and I would calculate an overall review based on the average. Now, the sauce wasn't very good, and I wanted to give half stars, so I decided to give the sauce 2.5. So this is how I designed the widget. I broke the parent and the children separately, and I wanted to use reusable children to create the widget. Now, the parent's responsibility would be to generate the children and look after the overall score and the scores of all the children. Well, the children's responsibility would be to look after the stars. I decided to use Angular 2 as my weapon of choice for this project. I'd used both Angular 1 and Angular 2 in the past. I knew I could get the project up and running very quickly, which is key for any side project. And Angular 2 is built on top of Typescript, which is a bonus. On a side note, our company Mews has completely killed all Angular development. Now we just focus on React and TypeScript. So here's the parent widget. As you can see, the overall review at the top, and then all the other reviews below. Using a simple setter, every time one of these reviews is set, I call update overall review, which calculates the average and updates the overall review. Now, using Angular's banana in a box technology, I was able to bind the reviews from the parent to all the children. I'll show you a couple of snippets of code just to give you an idea how I made it work. So this is the parent component, and you can see the red arrows. Can you see that? You can see the red arrows with the banana in a box technology, the circle bracket inside the square bracket. These are the first 3 reviews being passed down into the children. Now, stepping into the children, I used an output decorator and an event emitter to event the score back into the parent. Every time the setScore function is called, the value of the score is emitted to the parent. Now, finally, the HTML, generating stars. On the first line you see, I loop over an array of 5 integers. Now, for the stars, I generate 2 different things, an hidden radio input and a label. Now, the label is styled to be a full star or a half star. When the label is clicked, it actually checks the hidden radio input, which then in turn calls the click trigger event, which then calls setScore and sends the value of the score to the parent. So, back at the parent, we have all the data updated and we have the overall review, which we're ready to save. When the user hits the save button, we create a new object, the review object, where we add more information. The place ID, the logged in user ID, we have the price, the comment, the name, and you can see the last 5 variables are actually the score of the review. And then I push the information through a review service into a library called Angular Firestore. But I'll come back to that later on in the presentation, because now I want to talk to you about a different challenge. Humans. Now, another challenge was, I wanted to make sure that many different people at the same restaurant would actually review the same restaurant, as in the same restaurant entity in the database. I needed a unique way to identify every restaurant in the Czech Republic. First, I thought GPS and using some kind of radius to review svíčková based on a radius, and having users input the name of the restaurant. But I thought this wouldn't really work. How would I solve this problem? I found this website. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, Mapy API. And they also have an API, which is also, all the documentation is just in Czech. Does anyone here work at Mapy? No? Okay. Anyway, after a bunch of time translating documentation, I found they had this neat loader.js file. And that loader.js file could provide me with this nice widget, SMap.Suggest. Basically, it's an autocomplete dropdown of everything in the Czech Republic. Looking into the documentation, I could see this line of this comment, omezení pro celou Czech, which I believe means limit the autocomplete to just the Czech Republic. So after adding this line of this JavaScript snippet, I had a working autocomplete powered by Mapy. And as you can see, if you search for the Neckled restaurant, you can see the name and address, which is a strong 4.5, by the way. Now, the response data from Mapy was great. Now I had a unique way to identify the restaurant in the Czech Republic. But I had another challenge. I needed to filter out the restaurants from everything else. See, this autocomplete dropdown was returning mountains, rivers, lakes, places, liberets. And that's when I found this POI Type ID, which stands for Place of Interest ID. Now, this place of interest is kind of a category in the Czech Republic. So from here, I needed to validate the POI Type ID. So I added the single hard-coded line of code. And you can see here, 5322 is the restaurant, 5329 is the hospoda, a Czech pub, 5316 is a beer, which is like a pivovar. So all these places which serve svíčková. So if I would validate the response data to make sure you selected one of these values, otherwise I would pop up a warning message. This is not a restaurant. This place doesn't serve svíčková. Just like that, the first user creates the restaurant entity in the database. The other 2 users check if that database entry exists, and if it does, they're redirected to the page, ready to review the switch cover. Now I use Firebase to persist the JavaScript. I use Firebase to persist the JavaScript objects. Firebase is great, especially if you want to do a side project. It's really fast to set up. It integrates well with most languages, JavaScript languages, Flutter, what have you. It's owned by Google. It's bought by Google in 2014. It gives you free hosting, free file storage. You get authentication, SMS authentication, OAuth authentication out of the box. It's really good for a front-end dev because you don't need to focus on the back end. It gives you 1 GB free database storage and has great database permissions. For example, I used it to validate the POI Type ID. Now, the original idea that I had, the original idea why I chose Firebase, or their product, Cloud Firestore, is I wanted everyone to sit around a table, eating switchcover, reviewing switchcover together. And as you make a change to a star, as you make a change to your review, that change is pushed to the restaurant, pushed to the Cloud Firestore, and that change is directly pushed to all the clients that are looking at that same restaurant's page. This is what Firestore comes with out of the box. Using WebSockets, if you're looking at the same page that the restaurant has, any change that's made to that page is being updated through this Angular library, and the Angular components are updated based on the change. Firebase can also do machine learning, and I have a huge data set of switchcover images. So an idea for an expansion in the future would be to validate that every image uploaded to my site actually contains a switchcover. But on that note, I'm deviating a bit from the front-end topic, so I suppose I'll wrap up the presentation. If you like Pixaso, check out the game. If you have any tips or places to go for switchcover, let me know. And if you have an idea for a side project, or you feel like doing a side project, do a side project. It can make your life more interesting, more fun. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Thank you. Do we have any questions? Everyone's like, what? Do we have questions? One. I have a thing here. Shortcuts. That. Anonymous. Looking for the person with the mask, you know. How does a site load that fast with all the reviews being listed on the front page? Good question. At the moment, I was only loading the first 10, and without pagination, I decided just to load everything. So at the moment, I'm just loading everything. I'm not sure how many reviews there are, but there's quite a few. And it's definitely not 40 megabytes, but it loads pretty fast. Next question, how many reviews have I got so far? Quite a lot. Most are from my friends, or from my family members, or from colleagues, or from, yeah, that's it basically. But we have quite a few. It's slowly growing. How are the limits on Firestore with subscription? I'm not sure what that means, but it's basically free until you use it to a certain quota. So you can have 10,000 reads a day, 20,000 writes a day, what have you. But it's pretty generous, and it's definitely more than enough to do a side project. Is it open source? Why would I make that open? No, I'm just joking. It should be open source. To be honest, I'm a bit embarrassed of the code, so I didn't make it open source, but I plan to in the future, definitely. The next app, Grandma Switchcover Review. Yeah, that's a good idea. I could kind of have it as an integration or some sub. I read that as a Garmin app. Yeah, okay, never mind. How old is the project, and what is the current Angular version? The project is 3 years old, And the Angular version is, however, what the latest version of Angular was 3 years ago. Where was the best switchcover? Are there any 5-star rated? There's not currently any 5-star rated, and the best switchcover, the hint was in the slides. How many switchcovers that you want to develop this project? I ate a lot of switchcover. Sometimes I have 2 switchcover a day. Depends, but yeah, a lot. Did you tell any restaurant owners? I didn't tell any restaurant owners specifically, but I have a story where I went for a switchcover during my lunch meal with colleagues, bad switchcover. The next day, we went to the same restaurant, big mistake, and I ordered the smush arc, and the restaurant owner came out and he started grilling me about the smush arc, about the switchcover, and it was a bit of a mess, but no, it's good. It's part of the business, right? Thank you.